if you get us online, we'll then go ahead and take the roll. Are we live? Thank you, Liberty. All right, go ahead and take the roll, Linda.
Senator French,
Here.
Senator Hicks,
Excused?
Senator Ide,
Here.
Senator Kolb,
Present.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Here. All right. Well, fellow senators, Senator Hicks, the chairman of our Select Water Committee, had to be up in House Appropriations on the other water planning bill. And so both he and our water development staff are divided between here and there. So thank you guys for being here tonight. Our first bill for consideration is House Bill 93, the Omnibus Water Bill Construction, and that is a Select Water Committee bill. Would the department like to take us through the bill, or would you prefer that we do it? You'll do it? All right, thank you so much. Welcome. And committee, you should have your folders, your binders, if you'd like to follow along.
So, Madam Chairman, members of the Senate Ag Committee, my name is Bill Brewer. I'm the Deputy Director of Construction for Water Development, and I will be here to walk you through our bill today.
Thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
So this book in front of you is what we call the Blue Book. You saw a similar version of this earlier when you reviewed the planning bill. It's laid out very similar to that bill. So one of the first pages in is the actual breakdown of the projects that we would be looking at. And I'll just kind of flip through things here kind of quickly. Following that blue sheet is the actual engrossed bill at this point. Following that on tab A is a brief description of our program. Tab B is our current projected account balances for this year that is available funds to be distributed. And then starting on tab C and going through tabs J2 is the recommendations for the construction projects we will be looking at. And then there's a few more tabs after that needed. Okay. So the first group of projects are out of Water Development Account 1. There's 2 cloud seeding projects and 3 municipal projects in that group. It's a total of $1,955,060 for projects related to those, or for funds related to those projects. Any question? Okay. So the next group of projects are from our Account 2 funds. In just a quick subnote, we'll get down to in section 6 a little bit of an amendment that goes, or information that goes with that. But the Account 2 projects in this case are all agricultural projects. They can be either ag or municipal rehabilitation projects. In this case, they're all agriculture. There's 7 bills or 7 projects there for a total of $9,368,240. The next group of 18 projects are amendments to existing projects or programs. Also included in there is the Small Water Project Program. There's 68 applications currently in the Small Water Project, and then the other projects are a mixture of additional funds due to mainly our current COVID, other inflation factors, supply issues that these projects have experienced increased costs. And then many of the other ones are time extensions. Those projects were not ready at this point in time. We did not want to set money aside for those projects without knowing what the situation will be in 2 years. So we gave them 2-year extensions to finish up their designs, easement acquisitions, et cetera, before we look at doing additional funds there. Okay. Section 3 is a fund transfer that is looking at transferring $11,200,000 from account 1 to account 2. This year, as in the last few years, we have a lot more rehabilitation projects than we have new developments. So we're looking at moving some of the funds from the new development over to the rehab funds. Section 4 is a transfer of funds from general funds. This would be to bolster the water development account 3, which is dams and reservoirs. We have been moving forward with completing quite a few dams and reservoirs throughout the state. And we are getting to the point where that fund is down to about $7 million.
Bill, could I ask you a question on that part before you move on?
Sure.
Initially, didn't we have 50 million in there from Select Water?
Correct. The original bill started out at 50 million. On the House side, it was reduced down to 30 million.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So section 5 is a clerical kind of change to the emergency water projects from last year or 2 years ago, I believe. Just clarifying some language within that bill that the project is per project. So there's just some clarification language in there, pretty simple. Section 6 is an amendment to the 2022 session laws. And this basically looks at, in last year's bill, funds were set aside in the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account for the Fontenelle Dam, the GID, Goshen Irrigation District Tunnel, and LaPrelle Dam to fund those projects when they're ready. This would speed up the process of being able to move those funds over to the projects if design work gets completed in between legislative sessions. Section 7 is basically just cleanup of repealing some old language in previous bills due to other edits that are being made. Is an LSO cleanup task. And then section 8 is just the effective date of the bill. So be happy to take any other questions.
All right, thank you. Questions, committee? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So down here at the bottom of the blue page, you've got 3 columns that add up to $30 million. Are they supposed to be lining up with the above columns above them?
Yes, generally.
Generally, it's crooked. Okay, thank you.
Welcome, Director. Come on down. Give us a hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I was up at House Appropriations for our planning bill, so I apologize for being late.
No, that's just fine. How'd they treat you up there?
As well as can be expected.
All right. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think Bill presented the bill. So if you
Okay.
have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Do you have anything to add?
I think he did a good job.
I think so too. Any questions, committee? Further questions? Senator Ide?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a little history. Is this omnibus water bill pretty typical from year to year on numbers and amounts, or is it less or more, or sort of you said it started out at about 50 million and it got amended down to 30. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I would say, it fluctuates from year to year depending on what kind of projects we have coming out of the planning section, where we're finishing up level 2 studies and they're ready now to go to construction projects. And this is a unique year considering all the amendments we have in the construction bill. And that's just kind of what we're seeing right now with, like Bill mentioned, all the inflation and supply chain. So we typically don't see that many amendments. And in general, I think between account 1 and account 2, some more of the municipal type projects and the agricultural type projects in account 2, and with the funds transfer from account 1 to account 2 and 11.2 million, we're roughly equal about what we're spending this year, about $15 million per, for municipal and about $15 million for ag. I don't know if that really answers your question very well, but generally, this is what you'll see in omnibus construction bill.
And Senator Ide too, just to talk about the 50 million, we were putting that into the dams and reservoir account. It's not the same account that the state engineer's budget has been taking the Board of Control out of water development, but over the years, we've seen a substantial amount taken out of the water development accounts and the ability to use those funds for projects because we're funding the budget for the Board of Control, which has most typically been on the general fund and with the state engineer's budget instead of coming out of project accounts.
Mr. Chairman, I
that
could
helps at all.
add to that if you'd like.
Go ahead.
There's been about 15 years roughly out of our history of the water development program where as a budget balancer, they've used account 1 to fund the Board of Control, like Senator Steinmetz mentioned. And that's equated in those roughly 15 years to about $93 million that has been taken away from getting water projects, specifically account 1 municipal type projects on the ground over the years. So, and what we're seeing now is, I can't remember the exact numbers, but out of account 1, by the time you go through and you consider our office budget, the Board of Control budget, we take money out for matching 10% of the drinking water state revolving fund and several other things. So account 1 gets from the mineral severance distribution account, gets roughly $19.3 million per year. And after you take all those administrative costs out, there's only about $6 million for projects left. And then you add that to the roughly 3.3 in account 2, which is more of our agricultural rehab type projects, and the 775,000 that we get, that's the 0.5%. For account 3, that's only roughly $10 million to spend on all water development projects in a given year. And as you heard Bill say, this year we had about $50-60 million worth of requests. And from previous years, we had about 30 million to spend in total. So it's going to keep getting worse in the future because, yeah, inflation, costs of construction, everything else. Yeah.
And just to pile on just a little more, we're also conducting our aging irrigation infrastructure survey to assess the condition of our ag infrastructure all across the state and our irrigation systems. And so that should be coming back to us soon, and we'll get our ballpark number on what we're looking at there. And so these programs will become even more valuable in the future. All right, any further questions, committee? Seeing none, I just have one. Did you stay for the Appropriations Committee to work the bill?
Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, they set it aside for this evening because they wanted to understand all the positions that have been kind of thrown around through the state engineer's office in relationship to the Colorado River and how that relates to the position in the planning bill for the Colorado River coordinator full-time position.
All right.
So we're tasked with getting them a one-pager so they can better understand that. And then in the next day or two, we'll probably get back with them and so they can work the bill. But I don't know if it's appropriate for me to talk about what their attitude was like towards the Board of Control and how that's handled.
That's what we were wondering because in all fairness, we were considering amending that into this bill so that we make sure that moves forward. So,
Mr. Chairman, they had quite a few questions on why it was brought through a bill and not through Joint Appropriations Committee as a normal budget would be handled.
all right. Well, thank you for that. That helps me a
Sure.
bunch. All right. Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, we'll let you go and we'll see if there's any public comments on this bill. Any public comment? Seeing none, we will, come on up, Representative Davis. Glad to have you with us. Welcome to the Senate Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and board members. Your question about the funding that our Senator Ide asked about, I've been around water development for a number of years, and they are exactly shy a lot of funding. And there's a big demand out there, and you alluded to the infrastructure study that is going on across the state, the aging infrastructure, and that's some of these issues. It's one of those dams in particular. And I don't know why we're not funding that enough to meet the needs of agricultural or municipal. So and we have the same conversation over there, but didn't get much further.
All right.
So
Any questions, committee, for Representative Davis? All right, seeing none, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure on the bill? Do I hear a motion?
Move the bill. I move it.
Moved by Senator French. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Senator Kolb. All right. Are there any amendments on the bill, committee? Any amendments? If not, I have a couple. The first one is on page 28, line 17. Strike condition and insert conditions. This is just a technical correction from our staff. Could I get a second on that?
Second.
Moved by me, seconded by French. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the amendment has been adopted. And then next, I would like to, you guys have a handout. It is the migration of the funding for the Board of Control from water development to the budget for the state engineer. It is the same as section 9, page 12 of Senate File 96. It takes $8 million, 8.5 million approximately, and puts that back on the general fund. I would move that amendment to this bill.
Second.
Moved by me, seconded by French. Any discussion on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Linda, would you please call the roll?
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Hicks,
We'll hold the vote open for him, Linda.
thank you. Senator Ide. Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes and 1 vote held open.
Thank you very much. All right. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 16. It is state land leasing improvements. And I guess we will run through that bill. I see the Deputy Director here, and thank you, Water Development and State Engineer's Office, for being here tonight. Sure we'll be in discussions further. All right, thank you. All right, so state land leasing improvements. And I guess I will just take us through that bill, and we'll have Jason come up and we'll work through this good little bill here that the House sent us. So this is an act relating to state lands, increasing the monetary threshold for improvements to lease state lands that do not require permission of the Director of the Office of State Lands, and replacing the standard to determine payment for the use and benefit of improvements. So that's basically what House Bill 16 does. It takes the threshold from $2,000 to $4,000. and also has some other conforming language on page 4 and 5. With that committee, I think we will take comment from the agency.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jason Crowder. I'm the Deputy Director for the Office of State Lands and Investments. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to this bill. The Joint Agriculture Committee took up this topic at length over the interim, mainly to adjust the minimum value required for a lessee to seek approval by the Board of Land Commissioners before placing an improvement on state lands. That value has been $2,000 going back to 1997 and hasn't been adjusted since then. We ran it through an inflation model, and when you do that, you come up with $4,000. So $2,000 in 1997 is $4,000 today. So it makes sense to do an adjustment and to bring the statutes up to current time. The other part of the bill, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, is to clarify a definition of value. Historically, the value for improvements placed on state lands that we were to consider when these leases changed hands, either through loss of lease or sale of the land, was the term contributory value. That value has been extremely problematic for us and for our lessees over time. From our standpoint, it's extremely hard to define what contributory value actually is. The statute did a fine job of saying that it's the value of the land after the improvements are considered. And that's a fine definition, but when you put that into practice on the ground, it was very difficult for anybody to come up with what that was. So when we were attempting to help lessees through that process, we were found short of finding a good value for that, and really relied on the negotiations the two parties would undertake. From a lessee's perspective, that contributory value is extremely subjective. One lessee's interpretation of the value is completely different than another's based on how they would use it going forward, or their expected use of that improvement, placement of the fence or the type of the fence, woven wire versus barbed wire, all played into that. So the Joint Ag Committee did a good work during the interim of trying to determine what another definition might be, and they came up with the term depreciated value. And when we were on the House side, the conversation revolved around, is that the appropriate term? Is that something that's easily definable, and could we move forward? We offered a different definition. We offered a depreciated market value, and that came from our appraisal crew. It came from trying to understand, if we were put in that position of trying to help lessees define what the value is, could we do that for them based on expected or industry practice, and what normal appraisal personnel in that industry would look to when they're evaluating these improvements. The House Ag Committee determined that market value was more appropriate for this bill, and went ahead and approved that, and that's what you see today. I have provided you with a proposed amendment to bring back the term depreciated market value. And it's not any disparagement on what the House did. It's simply, when we ran the term market value back through our appraisal staff, they again had difficulty in determining what that actually is. And Madam Chair, one of the main intents of this bill is to clear up confusion. We want to make sure that we're all playing from the same set of rules, that we all understand the value that we're talking about in these scenarios. And so the term market value in their mind didn't meet that bar. What they said was, when you're talking about market value, that's a value that an asset will bring when it's exposed to the open market. Obviously, the improvements on state land, the ones that we can't remove from the land, are things like water wells, like fences, like pipeline systems. Those will not be exposed to an open market. They can't be bid upon. However, we do know what a replacement cost of those improvements would be. We can get bids from different installers. We can look at material costs and determine what the replacement cost of that improvement would be. So this is why we offer you the amendment that I handed out earlier. It's simply to reinsert the idea of the depreciated market value, because that is an identifiable value at a point in time that takes into consideration current market rates, and using the term market rates loosely, but essentially what would it cost to build that fence today, or at the time the lease would transfer, instead of what would it cost 50 years ago when the fence was originally constructed. And then consider what the a depreciated life is, or how old is that fence, or what is the condition of that fence. And then that would determine the value the owner of the improvement was eligible for if they could not come to an agreement between the old lessee and the new lessee. And that's a good addition that the House Ag Committee put on this bill, is that we're expecting those two parties to have a negotiation. We're expecting them to talk before this provision would kick in. That's what we currently expect out on the ground, but this really solidifies it within statute. Madam Chair, the addition of adding depreciated market value is laid out for you in the amendment that I provided, and that we would add back in the definition of depreciated market value in the place where the definition of contributory value previously was, just so there is a clear instruction from the legislature to this situation, or to our appraisers, or to the lessees who are involved in this situation, that we're trying to be as clear as possible and remove any subjectivity that might be in place. And Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you for that. Committee, any questions? Any questions? Seeing none. Oh, we have Senator Kolb. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Question about the language change between what you'd like to have as depreciated market value. Is that an absolute necessity in your eyes to make sure that you can, I don't know, properly value these changes? Could you share, I mean, because I just looked at what happened in the House on my phone, and I just wondered how strong you are in this. And, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Kolb. What we're trying to seek is a definition that we can apply a value to. When our appraisers are asked to be put in the position of determining that value, can they look at a definition and determine it? We've all worked with appraisers. They're extremely black and white. There's no gray in their world, and they need to know exactly what the intent is to determine a value, and they're very specific about that. So when we're trying to determine market value, the definition that they come up with for market value doesn't put them in that good place. We don't have an asset that can be bought and sold in an open market. So this is something they feel more comfortable with.
All right, any further questions, committee? Seeing none, if you could stick around just in case we unearth some more, and then we'll, oh, yep, go ahead, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On these improvements, how are they treated property tax wise? Can you answer that? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator Ide, I don't know if I can fully answer that for you. What we do know, or what we believe in the office, is that the land is not taxable, but the improvements or the businesses that are placed upon the property could be. How agriculture improvements are handled in property taxes, I couldn't answer that for you.
All right, thank you, Senator Ide. All right, we will open it up for public testimony. Come on up. Welcome, Mr. Magagna.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jim McGaggan with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. We initially brought this issue to the Joint Ag Committee with our focus being primarily on changing the term contributory value, because we found that just to be very confusing. The example I use often that's very straightforward, if I build a set of sheep corrals on a parcel of state land, because I'm in the sheep business, they have a pretty high value to me. But if that parcel of land is acquired by a cattle producer, they're actually a negative. They have no value to that person. So contributory value was just very confusing. In terms of that part of it, we're comfortable with the language that came from the House, but we're also have no problem with the suggested amendment that the Office of State Lands brought to you. I think either one of those, from our perspective, meets the need that we see out there for that. And then as to the other part of the bill, it's just a simple matter of keeping up with inflation with the changing the 2,000, 4,000. So with that, Madam Chairman, we would encourage your support of this bill. And I failed to mention when I started out, I'm with the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, but I'm also representing the Wyoming Wool Growers Association at this time.
All right,
you.
very good. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Magagna? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Seemed like I've sat in this seat before, Chairman Stein. That's Brett
like
Moline,
it.
Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Not supporting this amendment. I think current market value is something that's pretty easily defined. Using depreciated market value, even with their definition of it, to me, just adds more uncertainty, doesn't improve the clarity of it. You know, the job of an appraiser when they look at the property is to look at that gray area. You know, that's what appraisers do, is come up with that value and to have an expert opinion on what that gray area is. So I would suggest to leave it the current market value. And with that, Chairman Steinmetz, I will sit for any questions.
All right, questions committee, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That kind of goes back to my question on how that property is, those improvements are taxed. That's why I asked that question. You know, like on appraisers, assessors on a piece of real estate, especially commercial, they'll do, you know, market replacement cost value or market value less depreciation to get a value. And, you know, in a situation on a state, you know, on state lands with improvements, I'm confused on that too, as far as depreciated value for those improvements. So can you comment a little further on that, why you have heartburn over that market value versus depreciated value?
Well, Chairman Steinmetz, Senator Ide, to me, you know, the current market value is pretty well defined. You know, an appraiser comes out and looks at it. What is the market value of this? Takes into account, you know, all the different aspects of it. With the depreciated market value, to me, it's not clear, even with their definition, with the useful life of the improvement, that's taken into account anyway when you look at a market value. You know, if you have a barn that's in great shape, well, that has a different value than a barn that's in terrible shape. And, you know, that's the job of the appraiser, is to come up with that market value. So I suggest leaving it as the wording that as it came over from the House.
All right, further questions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any further public comment? Further public comment? Is there anyone online? Seeing no one, committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Cole,
Second.
seconded by
No,
French.
Are we on the, excuse me, Madam Chair, are we on the amendment right now?
No, we're moving the bill, and
Okay.
then we can talk about amending the bill after we move it. So, let's just go ahead and have some discussion about the proposed amendment. I know we usually do that after we move the amendment, but why don't we just discuss the proposed amendment rather than move it? Unless someone wants to move it.
I'll move the amendment.
Okay, moved by Kolb. Is there a second? Seeing none, the amendment has failed. I guess we don't need to have discussion on the amendment. All right, is there any further amendment to the bill? Any further amendments? Seeing none, discussion on the bill. Seeing no discussion on the bill, Linda, would you call the roll?
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye. And we will see if Senator Hicks would like to vote on House Bill 16, state land leasing improvements. Or should we hold the vote open for you until
Please
you?
hold the vote open.
All right, we will hold that open for him, so he has a minute to consider the bill. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 20, Land Exchanges Notice. We'll have the agency come back again and let us know what we're doing with this good little bill. And go ahead and take us through the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Jason Crowder, Deputy Director for the Office of State Lands and Investments. The bill is very straightforward at this point. It's simply a notice to certain individuals when the office is entertaining a land transaction or a land exchange. We currently do this in our process as we move forward with the land exchange. We want to make sure everybody is aware that the board is entertaining a certain transaction. And so we send out notice. We do that through the Gov Delivery push. We do that through a notice on our website. We also send hard copy notices to the county clerk's office and the local library within the county that's the transaction is situated in, as well as to the county commissioners. What this bill does is codify that process and add a couple more parties to it. And before we can finalize an exchange, we need to notice those parties directly. Those additional parties are adjoining landowners and existing leaseholders. It's also important to note, part of our existing process, that anybody can nominate a parcel for sale, acquisition, or exchange. It doesn't have to be the lessee. But if it's not the lessee, the board requires that the applicant get what we call a surface lessee notice and consent form signed by that lessee. So that is direct notice to those existing lessees, is having that consent form signed. So that is an existing practice as well. So Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions, but really the only addition to our existing process is notification to those adjoining landowners.
To the adjoining landowners, leaseholders of state lands to be exchanged, and then the county commissioners, right, of the affected county.
Madam Chair, that's correct.
And
Yeah.
so if it were two counties, does it ever cross state line or county lines?
Madam Chair, sometimes it does, and we do notice both counties, both parties in each county.
Okay, and I guess just for my edification, how exactly, what triggers this? How, can you just walk us through the process just for our own edification?
Absolutely. Madam Chair, we receive an application in the office. It's placed on a Category 1 list. That list is, the transactions on that list are reviewed by the director to see if they meet our trust land management objectives. If she feels like it might, then she moves the transaction to a Category 2 status. And at that point, we present it to the Board of Land Commissioners in executive session. And they too get to review the details, the preliminary details of the transaction to see if they might meet those trust land management objectives. If they agree that it might and they would like to hear it in open session, they give us that direction. They don't take an action in executive session, but they say they'd like to hear that transaction in open session. We bring it back to them. They take an initial vote on the transaction, and that vote is to approve or deny the office moving forward in its analysis process, in the appraisal process, in the detailed analysis process. If they do that, then we start all of those. We enter into basically a buy-sell agreement with the applicant. It's called an agreement to initiate the exchange. We dictate how the appraisal will be done, who will pay for it, how it will be done, the instructions of the appraisal, and so forth. And once the appraisal is done, we start writing what we call a detailed analysis, and it takes into account every aspect of all the parcels involved in the transaction. Obviously, we're looking at it from a fiduciary perspective. How does this transaction benefit the beneficiaries? And so we'll have a lot of discussion within that document to that point. But also, the Board of Land Commissioners rules require us to reach out to the Game and Fish Department as well as the State Parks and Cultural Resources Department and see if there are any attributes that they find important related to the exchange. Are they impacted positively or negative? We all put that all in a detailed analysis. Once that's done, that is the point where we notify the public, and everybody on this list, we would notify them at that point. We would give them all a copy of that detailed analysis that they can make comments against. It also kicks off a 60-day public comment period. And within that 60 days, we hold a public hearing within the county or counties that are affected by the transaction. Once that public hearing has been done, the 60-day comment period has closed, we pull all of that together, all the comments, along with the detailed analysis, and provide it to the Board of Land Commissioners one more time for their final consideration. If they vote to approve, then we move towards closing. If they vote to deny, then the transaction is done right there.
All right, questions, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. At any point, say a person's started the process for land acquisition or whatever, and you get a negative comment from Game and Fish or whatever, can that applicant challenge that? Hire an attorney to challenge that assessment? Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator French, anytime we get a negative comment, we ask the proponent or the applicant to respond to that negative comment. Do they have an answer for it? Do they have some mitigating measures for it? Give them that opportunity. If they'd like to hire an attorney, it's certainly their right to do so anytime during the process. But there's not a decision made at that point. It's simply a negative comment. Really, the decision is made when the Board of Land Commissioners votes to approve the transaction or not. And at that time, if they don't like that outcome, they can hire an attorney to appeal it or do whatever's available for them.
All right, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Question, page 2, line 11. The word affected, and what is your definition, a strict definition of what that means as it pertains to other counties? How do you determine, I guess, when they're affected? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb, I think we take a very broad definition to the term affected. We want to make sure as many people as possible understand the transaction is occurring, and if there are any impacts, the board would like to know what those are. So and we're going to be a little bit limited in what we know about the term affected. If we know that a separate county, if it's right on the line, then we'll go ahead and add them in. I don't know if we've had that situation to date that I can draw an example for you, but we want to make sure anybody who's impacted or affected by the transaction understands that it's going on. Historic practice is we feel like we touch all of those folks by talking to the county commissioners and putting it in the paper. We advertise that public hearing in a local paper, so hopefully we've reached all of those adjoining landowners. We haven't, I'll take that back. When we put the notice out, we try to get a list of those adjoining landowners to make sure that they're understanding, but that's probably the piece we've gotten the most criticism on, is that possibly we didn't reach every single one of those adjoining landowners.
All right, follow up, Senator Kolb, and then we'll go to you.
Well, let's say there's a
Senator
road that comes in from an adjoining county that's going to be impacted. I mean, I would hope that you would always benefit or err on the side of notice to more folks than less folks. Would that be a policy that you would employ?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Kolb, maybe I'm misunderstanding your question. Are you thinking that we would notice everybody that's along the road leading into the parcel?
No, no, I'll clarify. So you had a way to get into a parcel and an area, and it happened to be an adjoining county. In that scenario, would you always notify the adjoining county?
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, Senator Cole, good question. I guess I still don't have a good answer for you because we're going to be thinking about the impact of the blue square. And it would be beyond our scope to understand how it would impact access to the parcel if it came through an adjoining county. But we do want as many people as possible to know. So if there was a parcel that came very close to a line or straddled the line, there'd be nothing stopping us from noticing those county commissioners in the adjacent county. But it would be difficult because our scope is limited to the blue square to understand how they may be impacted.
All right. Senator Ide, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just real quick, is there a focus or an effort to, if you're doing an exchange, to try to keep the net in that particular county? Or, how do you sort of screen that and try to keep the balance so you're not, piling a bunch of state lands into, a neighboring county potentially? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Hyde, we look at the impacts county by county a certain exchange may have, and it's more directly to the taxable impact transaction may have. We have done transactions, very good ones, that pull a lot of state land out of one county and put it into another one. All of those transactions have more of a benefit to those other counties than just property taxes. There are sale and use taxes that are probably heightened, and we take that into consideration when we're writing the detailed analysis as well. So to your point, we don't necessarily try to keep an acreage balance within each county, but the Board of Land Commissioners are made aware to the taxable implications an exchange has. And again, we're looking at this from a statewide basis, from a fiduciary benefit to the statewide beneficiaries and not necessarily a county by county situation.
All right. Any more questions?
Madam Chairman.
Yep. Go ahead, Senator Hicks.
Jason, on page 2 with the new language that requires the notification to leaseholders, owners adjoining state lands, and county commissioners. There's no time frame for when that notice would have to be given before a decision is made by the board. The board may authorize the purchase of the lands after that. And I guess the point I'm trying to get to is not to say that there would ever be anything nefarious, but it needs to be a notice in a timely fashion that the landowners have ample time, or the county commissioners, to be able to actually weigh in on that process. So I'm just thinking that we need to put something in here that say notice will be provided. How long before the board may authorize the purchase of the lands? What is a reasonable time frame? Is it 60 days before an action of the board that notice would have to go out? 30 days? I think it's important that we set a time frame, because you know what the criticism will be, right? I didn't find out about it until the day before they made a decision. And so I'm just trying to figure out if we need to incorporate something in there. Certainly it could be a lot further than that, but at a minimum, it needs to be 30 days before any fine, or before the board takes this up as a board matter. What's your thoughts?
Madam Chair, Senator Hicks, that is a criticism we receive a lot. And it's very difficult to notice everybody in whatever timely fashion they'd like to be noticed. It's important to note that real estate transactions go through a sensitive time. In fact, the Board of Land Commissioners rules require us to keep those transactions on Category 1 in confidence, that we don't share those with the public because of the possible impact to the value of that land it being noticed to the public may have. We don't believe any nefarious actions could occur either. However, there's an opportunity for that, for somebody to go out and impact the market and make the value of that land artificially greater than what it should be, and put the state at a decreased position. Also, the Board of Land Commissioners reviews these transactions in executive session. They do so for the exact same reason, so that there's not an impact to that value and a harm to the state when it's looking to acquire a piece of property. So notice to the public before that point seems to be inappropriate and may have a harmful effect to doing transactions or the state getting a good deal in those transactions. And so we hold very steady to that premise. After that, once it's been noticed to the Board of Land Commissioners, we do that in an open public session. And I think that's one spot where we can do a better job. And I'm not sure how to write it in statute, but we've discussed doing another, not just put it on our website because it's there at that point too, but maybe another Gov delivery push to our subscribers to say, please understand that the Board of Land Commissioners is entertaining this transaction. But it's also important to note that it's a conceptual transaction at that point. We have some general ideas about the parcels involved and the attributes of those parcels, but they have not been appraised. And we do have existing statute that allows us to adjust lands if the appraisal comes back at differing values. The state land being a different value than the land we're exchanging into. So we don't have a fully vetted exchange at that point. And we haven't done the detailed analysis, nor has the sister agencies had the opportunity to weigh in on the transaction. So when we notice the public at that point, it's with very little information and it's without any vetting. And it certainly doesn't have the light of how will this impact the state's trust beneficiaries at that point. So
Madam Chairman, Jason, if I may, so under this statute, at what point in that process would you provide notice to those adjacent landowners and the leaseholder and the county commissioners? That's what I'm trying to figure out is at what point in time do you, and we'll talk about what a notice is here in a little bit, but what time in that process do you envision that you're going to notice those folks?
Madam Chair and Senator Hicks, and again, this is largely our existing process. The existing leaseholder, if they're not the applicant, would get noticed once the application has been submitted.
Okay.
And that's prior to all of the confidential situations that I just discussed. That's a requirement of the board.
For the leaseholder.
The leaseholder, that's correct.
What about commissioners and the adjacent landowners at the same time?
No, sir. Madam Chair, the adjacent landowners and the county commissioners are noticed once the detailed analysis is completed and the fully vetted transaction from our perspective, from the fiduciary perspective, is complete.
Okay. And then, Madam Chairman, it just says here after the director provides notice. So, you know, we deal with this all the time. Some people think if they place it on their website, that constitutes notice. So are you anticipating that these would be mailed out, emailed, and what form of the notice is that going to be?
Go ahead.
What's the methodology that you anticipate under the new language brought in? Is it going to be certified mail to the leaseholder? Is it going to be an email or a mailing of record? Again, I'm just trying to make sure that if we're going to provide notice, what kind of notice is it?
Madam Chair, Senator Hicks, on the House side, they inserted the word direct. So a direct notice to leaseholders of state lands to be exchanged and owners of adjoining lands. So I would anticipate that that would be either through email directly to each one of those if we have the emails, or by hard copy by sending a letter. But in any event, it needs to be direct and it can't be passive through just a website notice.
All right. Any further questions?
No, Madam Chairman.
All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, stick around. I'm sure we'll have more in a little while, possibly. So we'll go ahead with public comment then. All right, come on down. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Again, Jim McGagna, Wyoming Stock Growers Association, also representing Wyoming Wool Growers Association. This is another issue that was of great concern to us that we took to the Joint Ag Committee with particular focus on the direct notice. I think that the Office of State Lands has a process of providing public notice, but it's our position that the current lessees, as well as the adjacent landowners, and certainly county commissioners fit in there as well, needed to have a direct notice. So that's the important point in here. As far as when that notice should be given, some of the concerns that Senator Hicks raised, we share some of those, but trying to pin that down is rather difficult. And maybe a couple of examples is, in fact, the legislature had a bill before it, I believe 2 years ago, which provided notice as soon as an application for an exchange was received. And we opposed that one because of the amount of confidentiality that is needed. If you're dealing with a private party, you're negotiating something that you don't want that out there too early in the process. And so that's a concern on the one end. On the other end, certainly the notice ought to be in time that the comments that are provided are meaningful. If the deal's done, so to speak, then those comments aren't meaningful. I think it also needs to vary depending on the type of exchange being done. If it's a private party, some confidentiality is needed. But in contrast to that, I would use a recent example that involves lands in the counties represented by Senator Hicks, where the Office of State Lands has proposed a land exchange to the U.S. Forest Service for numerous parcels of land. And I have now heard from 2 grazing lessees in that area who said that they were never notified and first became aware of those parcels when State Lands submitted their proposal to the Forest Service. And that's when we first became aware of the fact that those parcels were being considered. So in that case where a private party is not involved, we would encourage that the board would and the office would say, well, before we put this out for general public input in a case like this and submit it to a federal agency or some other type of public entity, that we would notify those current grazing lessees. So with that, Madam Chairman, I think perhaps only time will tell whether this language adequately addresses this, but we do think the emphasis on direct notice is an important step forward beyond where we have been in the past, and we're certainly supportive of this legislation.
All right. Questions from the committee? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Any further public comment on this bill? Further
Chairman.
public?
Madam Chairman.
Yep, go ahead.
So Jason, got a question if you could come back up.
Can we finish up this public comment and
Yeah.
then go back to Jason? All right, come on. Oh, was Farm Bureau coming? No. Okay, then come on back.
So just a question, so when we get to page 2 and we talk about the notice to the owners of adjoining lands, my assumption would be if this is exchanged, it's a notice of the lands that are going to be exchanged, that those adjoining landowners, and also the lands that are going to be acquired, those adjoining landowners. Is that the way you read that? Or is it just the ones that are going to be traded and not acquired for those adjoining landowners? You're going to have 2 different groups of landowners, one here and one here. Who gets noticed?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Senator Hicks.
And when does that become so cumbersome that it's it becomes hard to do that?
Right. Madam Chair, Senator Hicks, it's a great question. In fact, it was a problem with the bill in its original state, and the House Ag Committee did clean that portion up. We feel and interpret this to be adjoining landowners to all parcels within the exchange.
Okay, that's what I
Okay.
want to make sure. All right, thank you.
All right, are you good?
Yep.
All right, thank you. All right, any further public comment? Anyone online, Pierre? Nope, no one online. Oh, come on up. Welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Pete Overmuller, Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Just wanted to say that, as you all know, some of my members are involved in some of these trades, and we support the bill and feel like notification requirements are an important part.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions, committee? Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, with that being said, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Cole,
Second.
seconded by French. Are there any amendments to the bill?
Madam Chairman, I just have one suggestion.
All right, let's hear it.
And I don't know if it would ever be needed, but when we get to page 2, line 11, where it says affected county, I think we ought to include the word affected county or counties, make that plural.
All right, is that an
Because you could
official-
have an exchange in one county and it's going into another county, or an exchange that transcends counties. So just for clarification would be to delete the period after county and insert the word or counties, period.
All right, Linda, did you get that? All right, is there a second on that motion? Seconded by Cole, moved by Hicks. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion has been adopted. Is there anything else on this bill? Any discussion on the bill? Go ahead, Senator Cole.
Just same place, line 2, or page 2, line 11.
Okay,
I was just gonna strike out the and put down any. But if Senator Hicks's amendment accomplishes the same task, I'll just withdraw. That was my suggestion.
all right. Well, that motion was passed, so we've got it taken care of. Is there any discussion on the bill? Discussion on the bill, seeing none. Linda, would you call the roll?
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Ide. Senator Cole.
Aye.
Aye.
Chairman Steinmetz.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, there are 5 ayes.
Thank you. Okay, and committee, I know this is unusual, but I want to talk about the omnibus water construction bill again really quick. So we made some amendments. We did a staff amendment, and then we also took care of the budget for the Board of Control. But what I did neglect to do was to put our position back to the Select Water Committee's position of 50 million rather than 30 million. And because of that, I would like to reconsider that bill. So I would move to reconsider House Bill 93. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, so we are reconsidering House Bill 93. With that, I would like to move the amendment. No, we just are reconsidering it, and I have to figure out what page that's on really quickly. On page 49, line 15, I would like to delete 30 million and insert 50 million.
Second.
It's been moved by me, seconded by Hicks. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Discussion on the amendment?
Just trying to catch up here.
All right, just a minute.
49:15 to 50,
Yep.
is that correct?
Go ahead, Senator Kolb.
Just a question, how's that gonna affect what we amended earlier?
Senator Kolb, that will have no effect on what we amended earlier. Go ahead.
Follow up, just, I thought we were gonna move the cost of administration, I'm gonna say this right, I don't have the bill in front of me now. And basically increase the amount of money that could be allocated because of that change. I'll look back, I wasn't prepared for this, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, my apologies, Senator Kolb. So let me go back through what we did. We went ahead and when we put our planning bill through, we went ahead and moved the budget for the Board of Control onto the general fund where it has been in the state engineer's budget you know, most of the time, and here I will hand that amendment to you. This is what we did. This is just putting this bill back into the original form as it came out of Select Water. So this was in our planning bill we sent over to the House. This is our belt and suspenders to try to keep the Board of Control on the general fund in the state engineer's budget. And then the amendment to page 49 of from 30 to 50 million is just restoring this bill the way it came out of Select Water Committee. The House amended it down to 30 million, and we would just be putting it back to the 50 million. This is a fund for the dams and reservoirs account, and it's a real need across the state of Wyoming to develop more water resources. And that was the need for the Select Water Committee to store some of that money away, just like we're doing in the Wildlife Natural Trust Fund or some of those other savings accounts that we're using for projects across the state of Wyoming. I hope that explains what we're doing. Go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just might add that that account was drawn way down, and there's one project up in the Bighorn Basin that's we're looking at $90 million for this. So that fund is pretty well decimated. You know, when 50 million is going to go a long way, but in the future there may have to be additional 50s out there. You know, if we want to, the cost of inflation and everything else with these big projects, we've got Fontenelle, different ones. They are so expensive and the price has gone up so dramatically. This money is urgently needed. Thank you.
All right,
Madam
further
Chairman.
discussion.
Madam Chairman,
Turn on your microphone.
Did I hear Senator French make a suggestion that we should?
Senator Hicks, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, did I hear Senator French make a suggestion that maybe we should put more in there than the 50,000 that the original bill
50
was?
million. 50 million.
More than the
50 million, yeah,
I
and
don't
25
know.
cents, Madam Chairman.
I don't know what you heard.
Are you proposing to amend the amendment?
No, I was just asking the question.
All right. Go ahead.
Well, I'll counter since I brought it up. You know, it was at 30, I believe they're 30 or whatever. They had brought it down to 30. I don't believe 50 is enough. And I can't believe I'm saying it because one time, I can't believe it's even coming out of my mouth. But one dam is going to be close to $100 million. So the 50 is not going to, somebody slap me after I say this. I can't believe $50 million isn't going to go that far. I mean, it's the world we're in right now, and we've got several of these projects and so many of these smaller ones that I don't think 50 is enough. I think, you know, the others are going to squawk if you go up to 100, may squawk at 50, but I think we should bump it up to 75 and see where we go, where it lands.
Senator French, I would consider that a friendly amendment. Would my second consider that a friendly amendment?
Yep.
All right, so we are up to Linda on page 49, line 15, $75 million. Discussion on the amendment.
Call for the question.
I got a question.
Oh,
Okay.
Senator Ide.
I'm struggling here. I don't fully understand. I mean, we're going from, you know, it's at 30 now and it's 50 is the first comments. And I mean, if 75 isn't enough, why don't we make it, you know, whatever number that is? That's why I don't really understand. I mean, how can we just arbitrarily just kind of keep raising the number here? The House sent us over at 30 million and maybe 50 isn't enough, but what is enough and why are we raising it here?
Madam Chairman?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hicks, turn on your microphone.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just,
So, Madam Chairman, Senator Ide, the bill originally had $50 million in there, and that was a recommendation that came out of the Select Water Committee to backfill some of those funds, and this goes into account 3, which is this is the dam and reservoir account. And through the House process, they reduced it to 30. And so I think what Senator French is suggesting, that if the original was 50 and they reduced it by 30, we raise it by 75, and then the process is we go to conference committee, and in conference committee, you're restrained by what the bottom position was and the high position is, and that's what the two positions that you have to work for between. And then the conference committee will come out and make a recommendation. So with the current position of the House was 30 million. The position that Senator French has said, we say 75 million. Usually in these type of things, when you go to conference committee, you take that middle number and you go what the differential is. And so by doing that, when it goes to conference committee, we can't go higher than 75, we can't go lower than 30. So you just go back to the original 50 or 55,000. That's the way the process works.
I see.
But if we put it back up to 50, that's the ceiling. We can't go above 50. They're at 30, so we're automatically going to move down $10 million to the House position. So it's a net $10 million reduction with the recommendation of the Select Water and the way the bill originally went into the House. And so that's the way the normal process works. And so I think that was some of the rationale that why we would want to do this. It's unlikely that our colleagues on the other side of the building are going to agree with $75 million, and we'll go have a discussion, and we might end up just having to compromise back to 50 million.
Thank you.
all right.
Now,
does
I do
everybody
agree with
understand?
Senator French. My preference would be 75 million, Madam Chairman, because that may not even build one reservoir. But we only have a couple that are in the works, and so this gives us a little bit of time to, as these projects come to fruition, to add more over time.
All right, committee, are we all clear on what the amendment is? Are we all clear? All right, any further discussion? Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no.
No.
I'm the tiebreaker, I'm an aye. And with that, I don't believe we have to vote on the bill. I will just have you call the roll again since Senator Hicks is here. So we'll take the roll on the bill again, as amended, in the amended form.
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Hicks.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Now we're voting, we're voting on the bill. Okay, aye.
Senator Kolb.
No.
Chairman Steinmetz.
All right, committee, is there any further discussion for tonight? One thing I would remind us is that we're approaching interim committee topics, so I'd like you to start thinking about some issues that you'd like to see us tackle as a Senate Ag Committee and with our counterparts on the House side over the interim. Be thinking of those. We'll have to turn those in fairly soon. And with that, committee, we are adjourned.